John.
Yes, sir.
Are you well? Jeremy Cordeaux from the dining room table. We miss you.
I miss you guys too. Unfortunately, I've got things on this morning which prevents me from joining you around the dining room table.
Well, no, we'll do it on the telephone. The thing you're missing hundreds and thousands biscuits, by the way.
Oh, now you tell me.
We'll save you. We'll save you a few for next week or something. A lot of interesting stuff is happening. What did you make of the Netanyahu going over to Washington and the? It was a joint sitting of Congress, wasn't it? Both
Yes.
sides in the same chamber.
Yes. Look, it was. Netanyahu wants to have a resumption of speedy delivery of weapons to Israel, so the IDF can continue prosecuting its military operation in Gaza.
You give me the tools, and I'll do the job.
And the sooner you give me those tools, the faster I can finish the job, Yeah. And it's like, well, okay, very predictable outreach by Netanyahu. What did we actually learn from it? Well, we learned that Netanyahu is hell-bent on finishing off the war in whatever capacity he sees fit. Now, of course, he's run into a little bit of a problem with a certain presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, already said that, there's a dire humanitarian crisis that is happening in Gaza, and Netanyahu has to do something about it. Now, of course, that's not going to be on the cards at all. Netanyahu, in his domestic political setting, is very much far-right, ultra-Orthodox religious groupings who believe in a Jewish state, and make a separation between a Jewish state, which is really an ethno-religious state, versus an Israeli state, which could be a state that also includes Arabs and so on and so forth.
Well, it does. It does, doesn't it? I mean, there are millions.
Well, it does, but there are two different kind of narratives depending on what side of the aisle in the Knesset you come from. There is the more religious-based state that I think Netanyahu is trying to sort of impose. Yeah. There is the more secular state, if you will, more sort of cosmopolitan multiculturalism,
which is what it is now. And how would you unscramble that egg?
Look, Netanyahu and his allies are doing a pretty good job of unscrambling that egg. And I think that the damage Gaza and the Palestinian people who live therein almost guarantees another 3 to 4 generations of hardcore fundamentalists who will be completely anti-Jewish and anti-Israeli moving forward. So the longer term, I don't see a great deal of stability from what Netanyahu. And again, when quizzed, I always say that Israel always has the right to self-defense. However, it is how they defend themselves that is always in question. Do they go in with a blunt hammer, or do they go in with a laser instrument? Now, we do know enough about the Israeli intelligence service to realize they have both the tools and the various methodologies necessary to carry out a far more subtle operation, which would have probably beheaded Hamas by now. At the moment, it's almost like a rerun of World War II. Some of the area bombing campaigns of World War II look very similar to what's happened. Was that necessary? Well, that I think only a future Israeli government will truly determine, because in the heat of battle, people keep on shrugging their shoulders, saying, "Well, war is hell, and they started it, and that's it." So to hell with Gaza and to hell with the Palestinians. But there's a much more underneath all of this, as most wars tend to be. So we're just going to have to wait and watch this space as it develops.
Well, what did you make of the fact that he was really playing to the Republicans, wasn't he? Because they gave him a standing ovation. A lot of the Democrats didn't, and certainly didn't give him a standing ovation.
I think that you'll find more of a split with regard to, who thinks what of Israel under Netanyahu. You'll see more skeptics on the Democrat side than you will on the, or should I say the MAGA Republican side?
Yeah.
But, I think that there is also a thing that many Republicans are hoping for if Trump does get in, and that is an expansion of a Middle East policy setting that they put in place while Trump was having his first administration. That is which effectively brought together Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Morocco, and Bahrain. So they want that clause extended to possibly include Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and various other Arab countries around Israel's periphery. So they're giving Netanyahu all the props necessary to encourage him to support a Trump administration expanding the Abraham Accords outwards.
Well, since Joe Biden passed the torch, how do you reckon that has changed the election process? Trump?
Look, I think in a way, fundamentally, it has changed. Has it changed to the point where, Trump will be defeated? Well, that's the big guess. At this point in time, the election can be said to be Harris's to lose. She does have internal support in the Democratic National Convention setting. That the seniors have thrown buckets of money at her. Her campaign seems to be on track, and she hasn't put a foot wrong yet. But then again, like we understand, as you and I have looked at politics here in Australia and overseas, Jeremy, there's always the honeymoon period. Harris is the new kid on the block, and everyone's going to give her a hard pass on a few things. And then when it comes down to the business setting, getting closer and closer to the election, the media will be less uncritical of her. And it'll be at that time that we see what Harris is really made of. I think the momentum is still with Trump, but I do think it's gone out of the MAGA sails.
Yeah, I noticed that you flashed me a message on my screen, but I somehow wiped it before I could read it. What were you trying to tell me?
Say again?
What were you trying to tell me?
Oh, no.
Was it something you wanted to bring up? I don't know. I didn't see it. But I just didn't want you to think I was ignoring the message you sent me. I just didn't get the chance to read it.
Oh, no, that's okay. These things happen, Jeremy. They happen to me all the time. So
okay.
I wouldn't worry about it.
Well, what do you reckon of rotating leadership or command in the Red Sea? I don't know how many nations are involved in that, but it's come around to us. But we're not going to be sending a ship.
No, we're not. We don't have a ship to send.
Is that funny?
But our Navy is very small. I mean, our taxes go to supporting this small but extremely expensive fleet. We also have a problem with personnel. We don't have enough crew to man a lot of the ships, fully man a lot of the ships, which means that we don't want to deploy anything out there without having a full crew on board, designed to actually have a full complement staffing them. And if you don't have them, and that's a problem for Navy to try to sort out. Recruitment and retention rates in Australia and pretty much everywhere else among the Western Alliance is at an all-time low. That's why there are more and more voices calling for a return to national service. And perhaps we can get out of our personnel crisis in that way, although it's a very controversial topic, especially here in Australia. We tried the conscription route, during World War I. That was defeated. We tried it over Vietnam with a ballot, and that was I think we like the idea of having the volunteer citizen soldier. I just think that the practicalities of maintaining a volunteer citizen soldier just aren't what they used to be. So I think that we really have to rethink this.
But back you mentioned the First World War. Now, I don't know what the population of Australia would have been, probably 5 million, something.
Less. Closer to 4.
Okay, for 4 million people, and yet we were able to raise a standing army of over 600,000 people.
Yes, but they were different times, Jeremy. There were different social expectations. People had a different what was Australia, what was their role in Australia. Now we're looking at a generation of people who really have lost their way. They've lost their identity. They don't know who they are. They don't even know what gender they are half the time. So, I mean, in that sense, I'm sorry to raise it, but, it's in the public domain, as you guys.
Where did all this indecision come from?
I just think that it was a case of the boomers giving too much to their kids and encouraging them in ways that probably didn't. They thought at the time, we had a hard upbringing. Our childhood was a bit, in some parts, and what we're going to do is we're going to more than make up for that with our kids, and that, of course, was a well-meaning exercise. But once the cat was out of the bag, then the next generation did the same thing again. And so now we've got a couple of generations, or 2 or 3 generations, that are not really prepared to do anything other than service to self, not service to community.
Yep.
They're, as I said, atomized individuals. They only care about themselves. They don't care about their neighbors. They don't care about anything else.
And we're doing nothing. We're doing nothing to correct this, are we?
No. I mean, no. Well, trying to correct such a malady would take it would be an intergenerational commitment by political and social and community leaders from the very top to the very bottom. I just don't see the talent nor the will to do that. We go for the low-hanging, Jeremy. We always go for the path of least resistance. So eventually, we kind of, some of the pacifists out in the community will say, well, in one generation, the pendulum swings one way, and then, a couple of generations later, it swings back to more common sense ways. Well, that is yet to be seen. I have no evidence to prove that, and I don't think anyone else has either. I think it's really a case of wishful thinking that eventually the next generation of Australians will get up and scratch their heads and wake up out of their slumber, and do something.
It strikes me that you've got to start with the current sort of generations. But if we start with the children and we give them a sense of pride and patriotism and nationhood. I'm not suggesting we become jingoistic, but there is nothing wrong with them at school and gathering around a flagpole while the Australian, I underline, Australian flag is raised, and we pay respect to our country and our leaders. And you can instill that sort of stuff in kids, can't you?
Look, I think it's again, it's going to be a very long-term thing that we're looking at here. I would argue that the only way that we can really truncate the longevity of putting this in motion is by having a renewed government push to reintroduce conscription. And by conscription, I'm not saying, round up all 18, throw them off into, a military camp for 18 months. And that's that. There are many different ways and forms of conscription and national service that have worked to the social benefit of countries. I'm particularly pointing out the Swede and Finnish. I've really put the Finnish before the Swedes, but those that they have are, across all sorts of boards. So if you want to be a tree-hugging hippie, go out and plant some trees. Do something for the community along those lines that interest you.
Well, you can have national service, or you can have service to the nation. Just twist it around a bit.
Right. Well, exactly right. And enough things to interest people and not alienate your society. And after the first generation go through something like that, the thing about being, understanding where you are in the state and how the state benefits you and you benefit it, that will come naturally. That's an instinct that will never really go away. It's no longer it, and we've got no social or political mechanisms holding us together. We've got this thing called multicultural Australia, whatever the hell that means, and we're meant to be celebrating everything but who we are. We all, and those few of us who still maintain some sense of loyalty to the state are deeply ashamed of our past continually because we're past sins, which we can't really do anything about because every country has a past and every country or every group of people have committed sins in their long histories.
We're told to be ashamed. We're told to have no pride in what we've done. But these things can't be sort of organic. It couldn't have sprung up. Somebody be masterminding or planning the undermining of society as we know it and love it.
I don't know whether there is a cabal of people who do that. I think that it's more a case of a number of disparate groups who have come together along similar lines, that technology is all good for us, so let's replace people with machines. It's great to lose yourself in cyberspace for hours at a time and become an unproductive individual, and or have drugs, and or do this, and become antisocial as a way of life. People really are afraid of the hard work of living a good life. And it is hard work. I mean, anyone will tell you, you've got all sorts of things that you have to confront. Many of them are deeply unpleasant. And we want to shelter ourselves and our children from these unpleasant aspects. But the very aspect of life is to, and every time something doesn't kill you, it should make you stronger. We don't have that methodology or that understanding of life anymore. It's like, oh my God, no, I don't want that. So where's my paper bag so I can blow hysterically into it? You see it in the university campuses. I remember while I was still teaching, they were introducing all kinds into the university set where the kids would turn on their lecturers quite viciously because they just didn't like the cut of their jib. And it's like, well, hang on a second. University is meant to challenge you, so you can shake you to your core, and then your belief structure either stands with you and serves you the rest of your life. You adapt to different norms and conditions, depending on what evidence is put before you. I mean, that's what it's all about, but we just don't do that anymore. It's too much hard work.
When you say they, and you were witnessing it, they were introducing all of this sort of woke nonsense into the theatre. Who were they? Who were they?
Well, an amorphous group of left-wing motivated students, and also their academic sponsors. I mean, there were a lot of senior academics in the universities who believed ought to be going in, and because of their seniority, they just corrupted the entire process and made it happen. What was it, an organized thing? I'm not sure whether it was organized. I just think that it was the sign of the times. People see this as the easy out. They don't have to confront the harsh realities anymore, and lecturers who had an opinion had to conform to whatever the soft norms of the time brought forward, and if you didn't, you were considered an enemy.
Yeah. God help us. I saw the organization called Save the Children.
Yes.
Now, I don't know. They're always on TV pleading for money and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But they want the federal government to allow the Australian ISIS brides and their children to be brought back to Australia.
Not a good idea.
Not a good idea. No. I agree with that. It seems heartless. Their parents desert in tents, but nobody asked them to go. They went because they wanted to, I'm assuming.
And I'm assuming that the ISIS brides are still busily having children, because some of the children who are caught up in their desert encampments are toddlers. So it's not like the ISIS bride decided to renounce having large families.
Yes.
They're still, having their kids out in the desert in the hope that eventually they'll have enough kids that they'll be able to shame the Australian authorities into allowing them back into the country.
Well, if we do that, I mean, surely they'd just simply outbreed us, wouldn't they?
Well, bluntly.
Well, that was another story during the week, that we are in a baby recession. For the first time in 20 years, the birth rate is dangerously low. But clearly not among everybody. From a cultural point of view, there are many groups that want a large family, 8, 9, 10, 12 children.
Well, that's right. And look, in the case that we're talking about, the so-called ISIS brides and their kids, it's all very good and fine to take the humanitarian high ground and say, well, evidence to suggest that these toddlers who are running around in a desert encampment are going to turn into, monstrous killers when they're adults. But then again, I would turn around and say there's no evidence to suggest that wouldn't be the case. Yeah. So how would you like to bring in your Trojan horse, let them live with community for the required 10 to 15 years, become young adults, possibly become radicalized by whatever their parents went through, or perhaps, they have a martyr complex if their father had been killed or injured, fighting the coalition forces in the Middle East. And I don't know whether or not, from a national security perspective, it would be in our greatest advantage to do that. Now, of course, there's an argument saying you can't blame the children, the innocent children, for the wrongs of their parents.
Mm.
That may be true, but they are in an environment which will make them very radicalized. There is no guarantee that they're going to come back and be normal citizens of any Western country, right?
No.
Yeah.
I know. I remember there was a song, I think, that Sammy Davis Jr. sang. Tony could probably...
Candyman?
No, it wasn't the Candyman. No, it was called Don't Blame the Children.
I think I remember that. Yeah. I was a big Sammy Davis guy back in the day.
That was a powerful song, and they were the kids, and we tend to blame them, and they've gone off the rails. But the song, the kids were not the ones who went out and got the drugs and created many of the problems. If we can find it, we'll play it because it's.
I've got to be me. But that's
no.
That's the only one.
That's another one. Well, we'd have to go into the web. Have it on my list of grabs, but it's in this. It's called "Don't Blame the Children." I think maybe I'll try and find it, John.
Yep. All right. Well, you do that. I look forward to listening to it again.
Well, I think more people should listen to it, but there are so many good songs that are just plain forgotten. John, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
No worries. Thank you very much, Jeremy. See ya.
And in the meantime, how do we go to your podcast?
Oh, yes. StageInternational.com.au.
Wonderful.